And so I went inside and I got a microphone cord, tied around my neck, tied it to the Civil War post, and just walked over to the edge of the cliff and just stepped off. Like, didn't even think about it. I just did it. And as soon as the cord pulled and tightened, it was like my first thought was like, oh man, what'd you do? Like, wow. This wasn't the right move. Growing up, I had a good family, you know what I mean? I had both my parents were in the picture. I had a sister, you know, I had a good upbringing. I played a lot of sports and stuff. And so, when I was a kid, I was baptized Russian Orthodox. And so as far as like my spiritual background, we would go to church, but it wasn't talked about in the house. It wasn't like we read our Bibles or I was indoctrinated. It was just like, that's what you do. You go to church and, thank God for your blessings and keep it moving. And so once I was old enough to stay home by myself, it was like that was the end of that. It wasn't something that I continued to do. And so I say probably around 11 or something is probably when I stopped going to church. And so I was growing up, was just real into sports. That was all I did: football, basketball, soccer. When I got about 12, I think I was just always real curious as a kid. I was always real wanting to do things like other people weren't doing or something, and so it was like I was just real extreme and pushing my boundaries and stuff like that. And so I remember I heard about weed. It was something I wanted to try. I had no idea, seeing it in movies or whatever. So being, that was something that I wanted to do, and it was like none of my other friends were doing it. And so I knew these older kids that were doing it, so I went off and did it. And at that point, I was playing soccer. I was on a team that was ranked nationally, wow. What I mean? I thought in my mind, this is what I'm gonna do. I thought I could go pro, at least MLS level, so that's what I'm thinking I'm doing. But at the same time, I'm getting sucked into this. So by the time I get to high school, that was all I did every day. I started experimenting with other drugs and, just getting deeper and deeper down the hole. Well, my family had found out about it. My mom kind of, because of her background, she got freaked out and started, thinking this is what could happen. So even though it wasn't I was not in a terrible place of addiction at that point, I think she handled it like I was going to. Mm-hmm. And so she started putting me in programs and outpatient. And so what happened is you have this 14-year-old kid with around these 18-year-old heroin addicts and stuff. You know what I mean? So it just fed that curiosity in me where I'm like, that sounds crazy. I want to try that now, And so when I was 15, I ended up getting sent to a rehab in Utah. It was a 2-part program. The first 2 months was in the Moab desert. It was a wilderness program, so you basically hike 5 miles each day. You make your own tent, and you hike to your food spots. So I went to that, and then you transition to a inpatient rehab. And so I went there, and when I went there, I think what happened when I was in the wilderness, something hit my spirit. It was weird because it was real freeing in one sense, because I was out in this beautiful place, man, these mountains. We would hike these mountains. It was honestly one of the best experiences of my life. And once I accepted it, I took on this, this idea of you're on your own now. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Your parents don't want you really anymore. They love you, but you're out here on your own. When I got there, I got into Buddhism. And when I got into it, I got really sucked into it because I was prescribed this medicine. It was an Adderall type of medicine. And so I would spend all my time meditating. That's when I began to do poetry. I started writing. And, so I spent all this time in Buddhism, and it really opened me up to the spiritual realm. I started having these enlightening encounters, or so I thought. It was the first time I had become aware, I think, of my soul in a sense. And so I got real sucked into it, and I noticed some type of progression, but mixed with the medication, it started messing with my mind. And so when I came home, I wasn't the same person. It was I had severe psychosis. All my friends were like, dude, what happened to you? You know what I mean? Because I used to be real outgoing and real, you know what I mean? So when I came back, I was shut down. Back at the rehab, I started having sleep paralysis, and there was one where a devil appeared to me in the dream and basically told me, you can't escape from me that easy. Mm. And so I started having all these sleep paralysis things. I started thinking that demons were my friends. And so at the same time, I'm getting into drugs more. You know what I mean? I end up getting on probation when I was 16. So I come home at 16. A couple months later, I get my first like legal trouble. So basically, to save some time, that what began was a very long, just downhill spiral. And so when I was 16, I started doing pills and got addicted to heroin. The depression was there very badly. Like I was cutting myself already. Like I was real like hopeless romantic, get real emotional about girlfriends and stuff. And like, but I was just real suicidal and depressed already. So now I'm just, becoming a full-blown drug addict and going down that. So I have this, bipolar going on, just depression, all this stuff. And it's just taken me down a dark path. And so around when I was 18, I found out, I went to jail for a couple of days. When I came home, I found out this girl was pregnant. So I'm in like not a good situation, my life's not going too well. And then I find out I'm having a baby. So I'm like, all right, so we're gonna make this work, you know what I mean? The girl initially didn't want to keep it, but I was like on some, no, we're gonna make this work. Like I want this. So I was like, no, we're keeping it. It's gonna work. And so, we have the baby. The girl moves in with me and my dad. At this time, my parents were divorced. So my dad didn't know how to deal with it. So my dad would just leave. Like he was, dating girls and would just like leave, and it would just be me at the house. And so this girl and I, we're not working out. She was there for about a year or so, and we're raising the baby. I'm staying at home with the baby. She's working. So I'm raising this baby. She's coming and she's working evenings. We end up like we're going through a breakup or whatever, and so it's just a real dark place. I'm suicidal. I'm going through all these like spiritual encounters though. Like I'm still, cause what happened is when I got into the Buddhism, it opened me up to that world. And so I'm real into psychedelics. I'm smoking DMT. I'm doing Reiki. I'm doing all like the energy, new age type stuff. Like I'm really into this stuff. But I'm like wondering like, why can't I get happy? You know what I mean? Like I'm having these encounters with these like light beings and you know what I mean, for like 3 days on these like enlightened path, and then next thing I know, I want to kill myself. Like what's going on here? And so somewhere in this time period, about a year after I had my baby, it was around 2012, I had a friend, one of my best friends that I grew up with from 7, and I was drinking one night and I asked him if he would come meet me. And I was, depressed about this breakup we're going through. And so he's like, yeah, I'll meet you. And so I drive all the way across town to meet him where he was at, and he doesn't show up. And I remember sitting in the car being like, this isn't like him, because I'm like, this is like my brother, you know what I mean? He wouldn't just stand me up like that. So, I pass out outside somewhere and find out the next day he got in a car accident. Now, it's not like 100% fact that it was on the way to see me, but I believe it was on the way, because from what I heard, he was at a party. They told him he was going to the gas station. I'm meeting him at the Safeway. But he ended up getting in a car accident, and he ends up dying like 2 days later.
Wow.
And I remember I just got hit with like survivor's guilt, you know what I mean? Because one, I didn't go see him in the hospital because they said he was gonna be all right. But it was all these things just piling up. And at that point, it was like, I was just over life, man. Like it was like my one friend I thought I had was gone. Everything was just terrible. And so one night I was sitting there and I was just outside, and where I lived was like a house, and it was on the Manassas battlefield in the Civil War land or whatever. And so we had it was like a fence of the Civil War post, and then it was this big drop off cliff, and then it was a river, like a stream, and then it was a river. And so one night I was just like, yeah, I think I'm done. Like there was no emotion. Like there was no like, it was just, I'm done. And so I went inside and I got a microphone cord, tied it around my neck, tied it to the Civil War post, and just walked over to the edge of the cliff and just stepped off. Like, didn't even think about it. I just did it. And as soon as the cord pulled and tightened, it was like my first thought was like, oh man, what'd you do? Like, wow. This wasn't the right move. And then next thing I know, it felt like I was in some type of dream. And in the dream, I'm freezing cold, but I can't move either. So I'm in this like dream state where I'm not conscious of what I did. It's like I'm somewhere else. And I'm fighting and I can't move. I'm cold. I feel like I'm in water. I don't know what's going on. And then my attention moves and it's like this little light is coming towards me. And so this light is moving towards me. Next thing I know, as it gets closer, I just found myself free. Like I just found myself like popping up from the water, and it all hit me what happened. And I had fallen all the way into the water. And I climb up, and like the crazy thing was the rope, it wasn't untied from my neck until that moment. When I went to the top, I'm thinking it broke off. It's still tied to the fence. So I'm like, look, you know what I mean? I'm looking at the length. It's double the length of the fall and everything. It's still tied to both ends. How did this? But I mean, I was wrecked. I mean, I sat and was just crying, just sitting in the bathtub. It was the middle of winter, so I'm like sitting there freezing. And at that point, that was a shift because I knew there was a God at that point. Like there was nothing that could explain it to me. And I was like, wow, like, something is really out there. Something cares about me because something saved me. So I knew that at that point. But it was a matter of, all right, what then? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, there's a God, but what God? What kind of God? And so, it didn't stop. I just kept going down that path. And so basically that was my life, was just going deeper and deeper into addiction. That was, I was around 19 or so. And so that path continued until I was about 22 or 23. I was like, I need to change my life. So I went to massage therapy school. So I'm like, I got to take care of this kid. So I'm going to school. I'm still, strung out on all this stuff, still depressed, still all these things. And somehow I get through school. I don't know. I have no idea how, but I get through school. I think the teacher just felt bad for me, to be honest. But so I get through school, and it's crazy. The third day before graduation, like everything was done. It was just waiting for to get the certificate. The third day before, I was talking to this girl. She calls me for drugs, and I end up giving her some. She overdoses. I call the ambulance. They come and they revive her, but she tells on me. So I get hit with the distribution. And if you're on massage therapy, you got to be a part of the nursing board, and you got to be on the CNA board. So it was like right there and then that all just blew up in my face. And so I was distraught because I'm like, man, people tell you like work hard, pay off. Here I've tried so hard at this thing and it all fell apart. And I ended up getting locked up for 18 months. And at that point, it was like, I'm older, I have this kid. I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm changing my life. And so, this is probably the first real powerful seed, I think, that was planted in my life. Was I go to jail and I see this guy that I know from the street. And he had been gone for 5 years. He got a 13-year sentence. But when I see him, he's completely different. You know what I mean? Like, he's not the same. He's telling me about Jesus. And I'm like, like, all right, but he's really like believing in this stuff. He's doing a Bible study, all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, it's crazy. I remember one night he was preaching at me. We were cooking food by the microwave and I snapped on him, I guess I probably manifested or something. But I'm like, bro, I'm tired of hearing about this Jesus, bro. Like, leave me alone, dude. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know what your deal is. Like, go away. And I get shipped off to another jail, and I don't even know what happened or why, but for whatever reason, at one of those points, I just started thinking about Jesus like he was my God. Like, I just, you know what I mean? Like, I just would talk about God and be like, yeah, Jesus. And so when I got out of jail, I was like, all right, we're gonna do things different this time, Josh. Like, we're in change. And so I started going to church. And that was like, it was a real change because it was like this one day a week I could be somebody else. You know what I mean? It's like Monday through Saturday, like you're, this drug addict trying to clean up his life. But Sunday, like you can be, like you can go to this church, no one knows you, and just like be like a normal person. That's how it felt. And so I would go. I never experienced like an encounter with God when I would go. But I would say that like days that I went, I'd feel more peaceful. And so I did that for a while. And then, somewhere along the lines, I kind of fell back from doing it. But what happened though, I remember they called me up to the altar. They're like, you know, they did an altar call, and I didn't go. And then the pastor was like, "Come here," you know. So I went up, and you know, I did the sinner prayer, but nothing changed. It was like nothing came from it that I could tell. You know, it was like, all right, cool, and went on with my life. But what I will say is that I started feeling guilty about things that I didn't used to feel guilty about, like. There was certain like drugs that I never felt like was a drug that I was doing in the name of like staying clean, you know, off of harder drugs, that I started feeling bad about those. So that was one thing looking back that I could see. But this is where really everything, that's kind of the backstory leading up. But this is really where God, I think, put his sights on me. I mean, obviously he's there from, you know, our mother's womb, but this is when God started pursuing me, and I was telling you on the phone, and I always tell people this. Either it was two things. Either it was God ridding me of everything and bringing me to a place of surrender, or it was the devil trying to take me out before I met God. Because at this point, everything just kind of hit the fan, and it was too ridiculous to like you can't make this stuff up. And so I stopped going to church, and I'm trying to get my life back together. Like, I'm doing well in my perspective at the time. Like, I'm holding jobs and trying to like do all right, you know. So I get my license back after like 5 years or something. And the fourth day of my license, I hit a fire truck and get a DUI. That happens. A week after that, I get a new car, or not a week. Sorry, like 3 weeks later, I get another car. My dad's taking me to Woodbridge to come get this car, and he's telling me I don't have a good feeling about this. And even in my gut, I knew something wasn't right, but I do it anyways. And so I take the tags off his car. I don't actually have a restricted license because now they like re-restricted it after my DUI. Yeah. I don't have registration. I just take the tags, put it on the car, and I'm driving. 20 minutes later, didn't even make it home because I'm thinking, of course I'll have time to at least make it home to get all this stuff legalized. 20 minutes later, I'm driving, I'm at the intersection, and I'm about to pull out, and I was like, oh, let me go straight. And I look 3 times. Like, I'm looking over, and like, there's nobody there at all. And it's 3 open lanes. And I start to pull out. As soon as I pull out, I'm like, diagonal, like halfway in the lane. This car comes flying over the hill. And as a 55, he was doing at least 60, like he was flying. And it was slow motion. As soon as I pulled out, I just seen him getting closer and closer. And I was just like, oof, this is, he's going fast. And it was just like, boom. And he carried me all the way into the intersection. And then somehow my car ended back up straight. And I was like, I'm just going to keep driving. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I just got in trouble. I was like, I'm done after this. I'm on bond right now. I have 8 years over my head from the other stuff. So I'm like, I'm just gonna keep driving. I'm looking at my car. Somehow it's still going too. And I look, and my right door is in my like driver's seat. Jeez. And I'm like thinking, oh, the titles in the glove box are gonna know it's me. So I was like, man, just let me pull over. So I pull over, and the dude, luckily, thank God, everybody's good. And but I get arrested. They arrested me for not having the license, and then they say it was my fault. And so I'm back in the cop car, and like my dad was right behind me. So he comes, my mom ends up being in the area. She comes. So I get out. My mom like felt bad, I think. She knew I was trying, so she bonded me out. And within a week after that, I lost my job. I was renting out a basement, and I was homeless. So it was like everything God took everything. So at this point, I don't have any friends. I have nothing, absolutely nothing. I didn't have custody of my daughter. It was just, everything was gone. And so I was just, sleeping in the woods. I was at one of the, homeless camps in Manassas. And so I got a job at TGI Fridays, and I was just sleeping in the woods behind Fridays. And so that's what I did for a while. Mind you, this whole time I'm crying out to Jesus. Like, and this is for anybody watching that, like, you feel like you're crying to Jesus and he doesn't hear. Like, I'm crying out to Jesus with all my heart. I'm on my way to get drugs. Like, please stop me. Please, like help me. Like, my heart for a whole year was burning for Jesus to save me. I just couldn't I couldn't stop. So I'm doing that, and nothing was happening. And so one night I went to Erie, Pennsylvania. While I'm homeless, my dad's like, hey, you want to come see your uncles and your my grandma was sick at the time. I'm laying down in bed. I'll never forget, I'm watching American Pickers. My uncle, we were sharing a bed, so he's laying next to me. And I'm like falling asleep, and I start going into sleep paralysis. I'm like trying to fight it. Like I feel like something's going into my body. And at the same time, the TV, the voice, the guys are talking. All of a sudden, their voices change to demonic voices, and they start talking about me. And the one guy, so they're both demonic voices. The one demon says to the other one, he says, his name is Josh. He's from Virginia. We have to destroy him. And I'm hearing this like, this is not happening right now, but I know it's happening. And I'm fighting. I still feel like something's trying to get in my body. I'm in sleep paralysis though. And next thing I know, I'm like off the bed, hearing myself screaming, wake up the whole house. My dad comes down. My grandma's like, what's going on? And I'm like, nothing, I don't know, and I lay back down. But then all of a sudden something's telling me to kill my uncle. And I'm laying there like, what? Like something is really telling me this right now. But I at the same time, I'm telling myself, no, I don't need to do this. I don't want to do this. I'm talking myself out of doing it. I find myself getting up and doing it, like going to do it. And someone was telling me, just crush his head, like just squeeze, and so I stand up and I'm standing over my uncle and he's sleeping and I'm like trying to fight it, but I'm doing it. And so I'm like going towards his head and then he wakes up and he's like, and he looks up and sees me. He freaks out and he's like, what the heck what are you doing? Like, and he goes and sleeps like on another couch and I end up falling asleep. So that happens. I come back home. I'm back in the, my homeless situation. And, a week later, I go, and these guys at the camp would smoke this stuff K2, and I thought it was a joke. Like I was like, there's no, because they would lose their minds off this stuff, and I'm like, there's no way this stuff does that. And so they're like, just take one hit, and I took a couple hits, like 2 or 3, and then next thing I know, I feel myself like overdosing, and I hear them say he's going out, and when I fall out. Like the last thing I remember was just falling out and crawling towards my tent. And then it was just, I was gone. And next thing I knew, I'm in a hallway. And in the hallway, there was demons on my left side and demons on my right side. They all had these like weird little robes and they were like short-ish and just ugly. Like what you would see in a movie, like these hideous, like laughing. They thought it was like, they were all laughing. Like there was some inside joke I was unaware of. It was just, it was weird, but I wasn't really scared. I was just so confused, like, where am I? And I'm following one, and as I'm following it, we're walking up to this big door, and I'm just walking towards the door like, what is going on? Where am I? And then it says to me, the one in front of me had its hood up, and it said, one more step, you're almost there. And when it says that, it turns around and has this big smile. And it all clicked, like what was going on. I said, oh, hell no. And I turned around. And when I turned around, I woke up and back up on my tent. And I was just like soaking wet in sweat. And so at this point, I'm like, I was like, that was almost it. Like I was about to go to hell, I think, and it scared me because at this point I had faith in Jesus. Like I believed him, but he just wasn't showing up for me. So I kind of felt like, well, there's nothing I can do about it, Fast forward like another week, and I'm at work one night, and this lady comes up to me, and she says, hey, God says you need to see him. And I'm like, yeah, I know, he needs to see me. Like, how do we get in contact? You know what I mean? So, like, the next day or two or something, I go to this AA meeting, and I'm sitting in the meeting. I'm like, something just pulled me to go to the chapel of the church. And so I go, and I stand in the altar, and I say, hey, here I am, God, like, here I came to see you, like what's going on? And nothing really happened. But I sit down and I just open a Bible, Russian roulette it, and I just read the page. And that's it, go home. Or back to my tent. And a week later I do the exact same thing, the exact same place, the exact same way. And I read, and while I'm reading, I get halfway through, I'm like, I've read this before. Well, it's the exact same thing I read the week before. It was Psalm 18. And so that really like hit me where I was like, that's crazy. Like I can't explain this. You know what I mean? So at this time, it's like, I feel like my life is coming to an end. There was just like this feeling of like, this can't go on any, it just can't. Like something's got to give. Either I'm going to die or something's going to change. And I was dating this girl at the time who was like really trying. Her mom would always talk to me about God and was, be supportive of me or try to be. And she was trying to get me to go to a rehab. And so I'm like, I'm going to go. And so there was this one night where I was like, I'm going to go the next day. And so what I did is I got some dope, and I hadn't done that for like 3 months. And so I get it, and I'm like, this is my last time. And so when I get it, I'm like, the amount that I had was too much to do all at once, but it wasn't enough to do twice, if that, you know what I mean? And it reminded me of where I was in 2012, where I just didn't care. Like, I was just like, you know what? I don't even care. If I die, then I die. And so what I did, man, is I put it all in there, and I had this moment with God that was so sincere, and everything got quiet. And I said, Jesus, I don't know what you want from me. I said, this is all I know. I'm looking at these drugs. I'm like, this is all I know. Like, what do you expect from me? Like, I've called on your name. I've done all the things. This is all I know. And so I started loading up the needle. And while I was putting it on my arm and everything, I said the Lord's Prayer. I said, our Father who art in heaven. And while I'm doing it, and at the end, I said, forgive me. And I just did it because, like, I knew I'm going to overdose. And as soon as I did it, I guess my body went into fight mode where it was like, you're going to overdose. And I said, get up and run. And so I jumped straight up and went to run out the door. And next thing I know, I'm in an ambulance. And so I'm waking up in the ambulance like, oh no, like, because I have these charges. I'm out on 2 bonds. I have 8 years on my head. Like, and they're like, all right, you're revived. Like, do you want to go to the hospital? I said, no, get me out of here. And when I went to leave, the cop was like, all right, now you can come to jail. And so I'm like, man, and I was so frustrated with the cop because I'm like, dude, like, look what just happened, man. Like, I don't need this right now. Like, you're going to ruin my life. And he saved it, I guess. And he played a part in saving it. But he takes me to jail, and I said something to the cop, like, you should just let me die. Like, why'd you revive me, man? Like, and he said, oh, you're suicidal. So he's like, we're gonna put you on suicide watch. So they put me on the suicide watch, which it just makes the jail experience 50 times worse because you don't have blankets, you don't get the food that anyone else will get. You can't have they put your juice and milk in a bag. You can't have that because you might try to swallow. Like, they take everything from you, and they put this big oven mitt. It's like the oven mitt material over you. So anyways, I'm in the cell. I'm going through withdrawals, and I think my life's over. I get one phone call. My mom's bawling her eyes out saying, you almost died again. This was like my 6th overdose, and she's just like, you almost died again. Are you happy? And that was the call I got, and everything hit me. It was like my whole life hit me. Like, you really ruined your life. Like, you made a complete mess of your life. And it was real sobering because there was no more like fight in me. Like, I was just like, it's done. You're done. And I'm like, I'm gonna be lucky if I do 3 years in prison. You know what I mean? Like, that would be a blessing. And you're not a good dad. Your daughter, you're not there for your daughter. Like, all that stuff's hitting me. And so for 5 days, I was just crying out to Jesus. Like, bro, the only prayer I knew was a sinner prayer from being baptized. And that's what I did. For 5 days, that's all I said. And it was like every time I said it, I'd feel like this 2% increase of like hope or something. I don't, you know what I mean? And it was like this mantra or something. And I was like obsessively saying it over and over and over and over. But I remember I said, God, if you get me out of this, I said, I just want to be a good boy. Like, that's it. I just want to be a good boy. And so I go to the pod. I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't do this again. And I heard there was a Christian program. So I sign up to go, and everyone's telling me not to go. I'm like, I don't care, man. Like, I need to change. So I go to the program, and within the first week, I was about to leave because they would wake you up early. There was all these like rules, and they would stay up at night, like, and they would like before bedtime, everyone would pray and read Bible. And I'm like, this place is crazy, Like, I was like, this is a cult, Like, I just wanted some God, but I don't want this. And so I was about to leave actually, and one of my friends that I knew there was like, man, just give it some time, trust me. And then all of a sudden, I hear this voice one day say, why don't you just try? And it wasn't me. Something said, why don't you just try? And I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to try. What do I have to lose? So the funny thing is, like, right after that, they had this time of day where everyone had to be on their bunks, but you couldn't sleep. So it was like you had to read your Bible or do something. And I was like, and the kid was, this guy, my bunkie was like, you want a Bible? And I was like, sure. So he went and got me a Bible. And so I opened it up. What do you think I opened to? Psalm 18. Same thing I had read in the thing. So now I'm kind of hooked, like, this is too crazy. So basically what happened is over the next week or two, I started listening when speakers would come in. I'd read my Bible. I was like genuinely trying. And then all of a sudden one day, there was no moment. I didn't feel God's presence. Nothing happened. I just looked up one day and I wasn't the same. Like, I'd be in conversations with people talking about women or drugs, and I would feel like this, like, turn for, like, and I would be like, yeah, all right, y'all have fun with this, and I'd go to my bunk and read my Bible, and I found that, like, the more I did, every time I would call on Jesus, I would feel joy, like, I'd feel his presence, and it would just kept growing and growing, and at this time, I'm like, I don't even care if I'm doing time, whatever, because now I had found Jesus. Like, I'm so intrigued and, like, consumed with Jesus. And, like, this is a good, I can't think of the word right now, but this is gives a good idea, illustration of, like, the difference. When I got there, I wanted to leave because they would read the Bible and stuff. Like, by the time I left the program, I was literally walking around all day trying to pray for everyone. Like, you know what I mean? People were getting annoyed with me. They're like, dude, we're Jesus out today. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so like, that's like shows like how serious this transition was. Like, there would be break time, and me and this other guy would be in the room where they could go to play sports or whatever. And we would just be worshiping. And, like, you know what I mean? We'd look up, we'd be in our own worlds, and we'd look up, and it's like all other inmates from other pods are, like, looking at, like, we're in there, one dude's crying, I'm laughing, like, and so I remember being like, God, you know, you don't owe me anything. Like, this, I did this to myself, thanks for saving me. And I told him, I said, but if you do get me out of here, I said, I'm going to lay hands on every person I see, and I'm going to preach the gospel. That's like, I was like, I owe you everything. Like, 2 days, or my lawyer had come in and said, man, just get time served. You sit and get comfortable. You're going to be here. Like, a week after that, this is right before Christmas, he comes in, he's like, I got your ticket out of here. I got a bed-to-bed transfer. It was everything I prayed for. It was a Christian halfway house, just like, you know, it was everything I prayed for. And then, you know, with the bond, they were fighting it, and it was funny because I was like, you know, it's just funny, like, thinking back on how much joy and peace I had during this time, because I'm still going through withdrawals. This situation's terrible. And my mom's like, they're not going to give you the bond. You know, it was just like one thing after another. And I remember feeling like God's just testing my character to see how I'm going to react. And I said, you know, praise God. If I don't get out, I don't get out. But so I ended up getting the bond, you know, like 2 days after Christmas. And I go to a halfway house in Maryland. I remember knowing, Josh, if you don't cling to Jesus with everything you have, like, you're done. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to last out here. And so after that, man, I clung to Jesus with everything I had. You know what I mean? I did what I told him. You know what I mean? I immediately started evangelizing everywhere I was at. I let myself be more and more consumed with it. And God just kept becoming more and more real. And so by the time it came around to court, you know, I transferred back to Virginia, go to a halfway house there. It had been a year since the court, you know, on bond. And I remember even my lawyer was like, you're going to have to lie about some things. He didn't say that, but he was trying to get me to word things certain ways and all this stuff to get out of it, because I actually got kicked out of the halfway house. It was a 6-month program, the one in Maryland. 6 months long. 5 months into it, the lady kicked me out because I was late coming home one night. Like, I was there, but I was in the driveway and not inside. And it was crazy because not even to play victim, it was like all the other guys would be like, bro, what is her deal? Like, she always was trying to like always had an issue with me, you know. But anyway, so she kicked me out, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, do you know that like a lot of stuff is riding on this? And I remember God told me like, don't, like, I'm with you, I got you. And, you know what I mean? And so when we went to court, my lawyer's like, dude, that wasn't a good situation. And I said, look, I'm not going in there lying. I said, I know God got me. We're going in there, and I'm gonna say exactly how everything happened. And that's what I did. And the judge told me, he's like, man, your probation officer wrote a really good, said, like, you're doing spectacular. He said, you've been out for a year. There's no relapses. You're doing everything you're supposed to. I don't see the point of locking you back up. So everything, he dropped it to a misdemeanor and gave me probation. So, I mean, that's, I guess, in a nutshell, my testimony. You know, God changed everything from that time in jail. And
how old were you when that happened with the judge?
This was 20. I was 25.
And
26.
how old are you today?
20, I'm 29. So I was 26 with the judge.
So it's 4 years ago. How did your relationship with your daughter and your family develop after you coming out of jail?
So when I got out of jail, my daughter was living with her grandfather on the mom's side. The mom had lost custody, so the grandfather had custody. And so I'm thinking, this is good. So I started seeing her every weekend or most weekends. And once I got on my own out of the halfway houses and stuff, I said, all right, it's time for me to get custody. And so I was seeing her all the time, and it was getting really good. And then I went to get, told the grandpa I want custody, and he started fighting me and started keeping her from me. And so I went through like a 6-month period of him not allowing me to see my daughter and feeling some type of way, and I ended up taking him to court, and I ended up getting custody. You want to know what's really crazy? I was praying about it because there was times I was real emotional about it, because obviously my faith, now I have a different worldview. Right. Her atmospheres that she's in, I'm concerned about stuff like that. So I'm like, God, like this, like I was really like in some emotional places at times in prayer about it. I remember when we were waiting for court and stuff, I had a vision of the guy reacting a certain way, doing something, and basically just throwing up his hands and quitting before we went to court. And man, that's exactly what happened. By the time it got to court, while we were waiting in the room, he stood up and threw up his hands and was like, I don't care, just, you know what I mean, and gave up. And so I got custody of my daughter a year and a half ago. And
Wow.
So now she lives with me, and yeah.
How is that? Can you just talk about that relationship now on the other side?
It's good, man. It's powerful, because I remember when I came home, my daughter wrote me a birthday note, and my daughter's very wise because of how she grew up, and how me and her mom were. She was real independent because we weren't very responsible, and so she learned how to do things younger and was very just independent, and so she's always been like wise for her years, I guess. And she had wrote me a letter for my birthday, I think the first year I was home. She said, it's like you were dead and now you have a new life. That's what she said. It's like you were dead, now you have a new life. And so she saw the transformation. But when she first came to live with us, my wife and I, it was a challenge, because when you're with a kid only on the weekends, you only see so much. You know what I mean? Like, you're not there for the homework, for the school,
right,
that stuff. But when I started having her for shower, bedtime, all the intricate responsibilities of a parent.
And how old was she by the time that she started living with
when
you?
I got custody, she was 8.
Okay.
8 and a half, somewhere in 8. So whenever I got her, it was rough, because there was all these habits that she had that weren't dealt with, and like just simple things like going to bed, take a shower. And so I remember the first 3 months, like she was having rage attacks like every night. And man, I put her in my prayer room, and every night I would just worship. I wouldn't even pray for her. I would just put my hand on her and just worship God for like until she was asleep, and then I would just forget she was there, and I would just do my thing. And after a couple months, everything started stopping. Like it was real supernatural watching, because it was like all this stuff came that she had, all these emotions, and I remember like being overwhelmed, and I just kept taking it to God, praying over her, and then it got to the point where she didn't want to sleep in her room. She wanted to sleep in my prayer room. And then she would be like, can you, sing for me? You know what I mean? Like, it started becoming our thing, and then I started noticing all those things that started leaving, like one after another, and then we finally hit this place of like, peace in regards to those things,
Wow. Really quick, how did you said you were with your wife, so you got married?
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to know the funny thing is that the when I said I got out and went to church, the girl I went to church with was my wife. You know what I mean? She would pick me up and take me to church. And she friend zoned me hardcore for like years and basically told me I have nothing for you ever but friendship. But then once I got, saved, I was in this church in Maryland at the Halfway House. I was getting baptized. And so I guess I had felt like she was part of my journey, you know what I mean? And it was like, I wanted to like her to be proud, you know what I mean? It's like, see, like, look, I get it, you know what I mean? Like, I get it now. And so I invited her to my baptism, and she came, and we hung out that day, and it was just kind of like everything was different. You know what I mean? Like she wasn't looking at me like this drug addict that needs Jesus kind of thing. We were looking at each other as, different equals, I guess. And so yeah, we started hanging out, and that's how it goes, and that's.
How long have you guys been married now?
3 years almost. April will be 3 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Josh, what can you say looking back at your 29? At your 29 years of life, what can you say Jesus has done for you?
Jesus literally creates life out of nothing. So Jesus upheld me through the darkest times of my life when I didn't even flinch about the idea of him. When I didn't even have zero concern about who he was, what he thought, who I was, just completely ignorant, just walking blind. He kept me. He redeemed everything about me. You know what I mean? He redeemed everything in my heart. He softened my heart. He transformed me. He gave me life when I didn't have life. And now he upholds my life. And when I've failed, when I've fallen, when I've made mistakes, even after coming to him, he's kept me.
For anybody who's watching who has gone through similar things that you have gone through, whether they've been homeless or they've had severe drug addictions, maybe even going through some drug addictions right now as they're watching you, what can you say to that person watching right now?
I'd say that as long as you have breath in your lungs right now, there's hope. Like, there is a plan and a purpose for you. It says in the Bible that the blood is always speaking better things. And so as long as you're breathing, the blood of Jesus Christ is speaking something better over your life. And so I would say that cry out to Jesus with all your heart, not to be saved, but to know him, not to just escape a situation, but to be brought into a new kingdom and into a new life. For so many years, I look back now and I realized that year that I was crying out for Jesus' help, it was the mercy of God that kept him from saving me, because he knew that I just wanted to get out of whatever situation I was in. And so I would say that if you're at a place where you're just done, Jesus is the only hope. Jesus is the only way. And Jesus isn't mad at you. That's the other thing I'll say. He's not upset, but he's willing, and it's a joy for him to redeem you.
Joshua, any last words for anybody watching right now?
I would say that life is really short. I have probably over 50 friends I know that have overdosed, been killed themselves. I mean, we really have no idea when our moment is at all. And so if I would say anything to anybody, it's that right now, today is a day of salvation. Right now is a moment that this could all change. It could be redeemed, restored, anything, no matter where you're at in your walk, if you're in faith, if you're agnostic, atheist. Life is, people take it for granted, and nothing that you're building here really matters. I just saw a video the other day of Lil Wayne. We all know who Lil Wayne is, and a clip, and he was saying, yeah, I get home sometimes and wonder, does any of this really matter? Like, are they gonna remember me? Is this all gonna matter? And I'm sitting there watching. I'm not to be rude, but I said, no, it doesn't. Like, it doesn't. You know what I mean? Because we're not, these aren't, what we build here aren't eternal moments unless we're building it with Jesus and for the kingdom. And so that's what I would say. Don't get wrapped up in the world that you're living in. Get wrapped up in him, you know?